So the webinar is now live. Welcome, everyone.
Hello. So
We've got, people are coming in now. Greetings, everyone. This is Kimberly Dasse from JC Legal. I'm here with my colleague, Sarah Jane, and we are going to be giving this little talk today, a quick little half an hour foray into celebrating the holidays in the time of COVID. Sarah Jane, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so hi everybody, I'm Sarah Jane Tasteyre. I'm a French avocat and I've been practicing in Hong Kong for the past 5 years in areas of family law. And I'm now based in the UK, still working with JC Legal and Kimberly on areas of international family law.
And I'm primarily working in the area of matrimonial law here at JC Legal. I do the occasional corporate piece of work as well. So I kind of am expanding my scope of work here. And we thought, instead of doing a sort of legal related subject, we talk more about the broader subject of families and expand our scope in that way today.
So let's explain first of all why we decided to talk about celebration of the holidays. It's very unusual, wouldn't you say, for lawyers to talk about that? Well, that's the real, the reason behind it, because Kimberly and I started to talk about, what happened this year and how we were going to celebrate Christmas this year, and we realized that it was a subject that everybody, wherever you are in the world, are very anxious about. So we just thought, okay, so on an everyday basis, we talk about divorces, wills, we often do talks about that. And with the holiday season coming, we thought, oh, let's stop talking about all this, which is bringing us down. Let's try and have a more hopeful and joyous conversation, or at least give hope to people on how to celebrate Christmas differently this year. So this talk is basically, you're going to say, okay, what are we going to learn from this talk? Well, maybe nothing. Because what we're going to say is quite obvious, but it's important to state the obvious in times like this, because that's when we realized that, for instance, Kimberly and I realized that although we didn't live celebrations of Christmas the same way, or holidays, we were living quite the same thing about, what are we going to do this year? How should we do things? So first of all, it was based on our experience as lawyers, but after all, we are women, mothers, daughters, aunts, we have families far away. We've been living away from home, wherever that is, for a long time. So this is something that we've been going through every year, but this year is a little different. So this talk is about how to do things differently with two main ideas. Stay positive, because there's nothing we can do about it. So we just have to find a way to do things differently in the way we want it to be. And second of all is no pressure, because that's really important. No pressure this year. There shouldn't ever be pressure, but we all know, if we're honest, that Christmas time is always a time of pressure. So basically what we realized with Kimberly talking about all this is that there are so many different situations. You may be the kind of person who loves going back home for Christmas, who come from a very tight-knit family, and you always have wonderful time at Christmas. You can be from one kind of family or you feel not obligated to go home every Christmas, and it's not much fun, but you do it. And you always find, some joy in it at some point, but it's, you feel guilty this year, and you shouldn't be, that you don't have to go home. And then you have all those others that never go home at Christmas because either it's really not something you want to do, or because you're away only for an expat contract and you just think, oh, I'll make the most of it, those Christmas, I'll travel. But this year you can't travel. So this talk is also for you, because it will help you to realize how you want to celebrate this Christmas. So I've been chatting long for a few.
I'm just going to throw in another idea here, Sarah Jane, that just occurred to me. I was at a talk a while back about family law, and the person who was doing the talk, they did a great job, but they defined families as basically either married or divorced people with children. And I'm just an auntie and a godmother. I don't have my own children, and I'm not married. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm excluded from this definition. So along with that whole subject that Sarah Jane is talking about, that you are free, of course, to celebrate in any way that you want. These celebrations come in many different formats and shapes and sizes, just like the look of the world out there. So however you want to celebrate is fine with us. However you're defining your family is okay with us. And the idea is to enjoy the true spirit of the holidays. And we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Like you say, family, we take it very broadly when we mean loved ones.
Yeah.
It's whether you're blood related or not. It's all those people that you miss in times like Christmas. So it's not a legal talk today. Make the most of it. But we did try to organize our talk a little bit, because at the end of the day, we are lawyers. So first of all, we tried to see what question we needed to answer, and this is how we're going to structure a little talk, if you want to follow a little outline. So first of all, the idea was, that you're stuck, you can't travel. So put the guilt aside and just think of first, that what will help you is what you're really not looking forward to this Christmas. And this will help you determine what would be your ideal Christmas. And this is, the whole, if you would have to keep something from this talk, I think that would be it. How do you want to spend that day or that holiday? It's not just one day, it's a whole holiday. So then there will be a lot of different questions, stemming from that initial question. But how would you love to spend Christmas? And from that, Kimberly will give you some, tips on how we answered ourselves that question. And this helped us to define how to make that possible with or without your loved ones on the day or on different days of the holiday. Over to you.
Thanks. So one of the first thing we're going to look at is connecting with people. And, we use the term people here, loved ones, family, whoever your people are. And what I like about this slide is we talk about holding time for self-care and reflection. And one thing that, drives us all crazy, I watched the Jim Carrey version of The Grinch over the weekend, and there's this great scene in the beginning when people are running around like crazy shopping, and the little girl keeps asking, what's the real spirit of Christmas here? So we can have all of these activities, the parties, the events, the obligations, the drinks that seem to connect us, but the question is, do they really connect us? And so one thing that Sarah and Jane and I have been talking about is how to connect with family and your loved ones. And obviously Zoom is the big way that we're all doing this. And we have a few thoughts about how to be effective with this. And first of all, if you're dealing with kids, you've got the younger kids who may need some help in talking. Then you've got the older kids who also may need help in talking, but in a different way. So, if you are going to Zoom with grandma and grandpa, or, the aunties and the uncles, maybe think about practicing in advance if you're not used to doing it, because grandma and grandpa may have some trouble with the technology. They may blow you away as well. But make sure in advance that you're able to connect well with people from a technological point of view, so the call goes smoothly. For the young kids, we were thinking, it's very hard for a young child, 3 or 4 years old. I mean, if you're holding up the baby, that's one thing. Just make sure you don't drop her. But you can hold the baby up to the camera and that's fine. But a 2, 3, 4-year-old may have some trouble focus and may just want to run around the room. So maybe spend some time in advance having that child read a simple poem, maybe do a little dance, and in practicing that event and going over the poem that you're going to read for grandma, or in doing the little dance you're going to do for your auntie and uncle, there's celebration in that practicing, as well as a celebration in letting grandpa and grandpa and your aunties and uncles see what the kids can do. With the teenagers, those sullen teenagers who often don't like the questions that they get asked, how are you doing in school? Are you learning to drive? Do you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend? Which is one of those really annoying questions for kids and a little bit intrusive. But prepare them for what they might, be asked. So what are you doing these days? It's a broad question. Maybe you can tell your teenager, remember to tell grandma that you're learning how to drive. Tell them about the day that you and dad went out and X, Y, and Z happened. Give them a few prompts. You may even have to bribe them a little bit so that they'll say more than 10 words. And it's those 10 words that grandma and grandpa will cherish. Um, I regularly do tutoring with my 5-year-old niece. I'm helping her learn how to read, and I do little programs on Zoom with her so that she can practice her words. And I find this really useful. I take pictures during it and I record during it sometimes, just with holding my phone up. I'm sure there's a more sophisticated way to do it, but it's what I like to do, and I share the experience with my parents. So we'll talk about, memorializing these events, but I'm just going to plant that idea in there for now. But organize yourself. And the last thing on this particular subject is not everything has to be done on Christmas Day. In the US, we don't really have Boxing Day, but that isn't an option for folks who celebrate or who have that as a holiday. But you could say with, auntie and uncle so-and-so, a week before Christmas, we're gonna, have a Zoom call with them on 10 o'clock Saturday morning while we're eating breakfast, or whatever the case may be. But make special time for people, carve it out and respect it, and enjoy the event during that time. It feels nice for the person receiving it to know that there's been some time carved out for them, and it also lessens pressure on you and your family, and that you can have those moments of celebration, but it's not so tightly packed with everything else that you have to do.
I think what's really important when you ask this question, how to connect before Christmas, it's like Kimberly, you've just explained. It's maybe do a build up to Christmas, because otherwise there'll be, like you said, too much pressure on the day. But not everybody wants to connect on the day, and we've got time difference and all that. So maybe, like Kimberly said, build up to Christmas, like what would you usually do back home in the build up to Christmas? Maybe do the illumination, the tree, and maybe decorate the tree together, or switch on the lights together, like do a mock. Everybody's doing that online this year, so why not do it with, on the Zoom call? So these things will enable you to make things less awkward, because you, instead of seeing each other every Sunday night and talking, like Kimberly was saying, what did you do this week at school? What are your friends' names? Do you have a girlfriend? It would be more like, so this is Christmas, like a bit, following the event. Every week you would have light a candle, or it doesn't have to be religious or anything, but just follow the pattern. And I think, like Kimberly said, this is how you will be able to come to around nearer to Christmas with switching on the Zoom and everybody being really comfortable with it, even forgetting that you're not actually in the same room. I don't know if that makes sense, but we all know how awkward connecting can actually be. So those, maybe some options building up to the holidays, especially in Hong Kong, since the children are off school. It may you have more time, maybe not. Well, you're at home, so basically maybe easier to organize it, because as we mentioned, the time difference between Asia, for instance, and the States or even Europe is always a nightmare to organize a Zoom.
Yeah, it's true. The other thing, moving on from connecting with people in new and different ways, but is also about how to create new traditions. And, some of the old traditions, we may be happy for those old traditions to go away. And sometimes we just keep doing those old traditions without much thought about them. It's just the way it's always been. And I remember one of the first bosses I ever had told me a great joke about traditions. And this guy gets married and his wife is making a pot roast, and she cuts the end of the pot roast off and puts it in the pot and cooks it. And he said, well, why do you cut the end off the roast? And she says, well, that's how my mother did it. Yeah, okay. So he goes to the mother and she's making a pot roast and she cuts the end of the roast off and puts it in the pot. And he said, well, why do you cut the end off the pot roast? And she goes, well, it's how my mother did it. Finally, he gets to grandma and he says, grandma, why did you cut the end off the pot roast? And she said, because it wouldn't fit in the pot otherwise. But yet we have this tradition of how pot roast is being made and no one's thinking about it. So what are your new traditions? I really love that one. What are your new traditions? How are you going to celebrate in the future? What traditions from this year maybe that you can take forward? I love to be at home to bake a little bit. One year I spent hours decorating gingerbread men, and it was a half a day of that activity in a very busy holiday season. And I don't remember the parties I went to that year. I remember the fantastic job I did on decorating gingerbread men with amazing outfits. And I did that activity by myself, but I've also done that activity with my little niece for a shorter period of time because her attention span isn't quite that long. But she talks about it to this day. So what are the things, given that we've kind of had to slow down in some senses, how can we really take advantage of that time?
Well, this is particularly important with regards to those who have children, because you're all, familiar with the notion of third culture kids. And for those who have children and who have been living abroad, we all have to help them build their identity. Because whether or not you realize that, a child who has been living in different countries, although he may have the upbringing of a British kids, French kid, American kids in a foreign country, at the end of the day, he's not from, well, I talk from experience, you're not really, it's difficult to know where you're from, where home is. So home is where you are. So I think those holiday traditions are very important. It doesn't mean, like Kimberly said, that they have to be the same all the time. It's just that give them the chance to choose between different holiday traditions. If you come from a country where you have very strong Christmas tradition, like the States or England or France, it's important to maybe, even if you don't apply those traditions to your household, maybe explain. For instance, in the French, British upbringing I had, I was explained that French people usually used to, I don't know if it's still the case, did it on Christmas Eve. And in England, we usually do it Christmas Day and Boxing Day. Which is great in my family, because my husband being French, we were always able to celebrate on the 24th and then drive down to my family on the 25th or on Boxing Day. So those traditions remain, but at least give them an idea of what the traditions are, where they come from, and then add, maybe if you're in a country where they do celebrate Christmas also, add some celebrations, like maybe we're talking about Christmas, but we could talk about Saint Nicolas, Saint Nicholas in the northern European countries, where they celebrate on the 6th of December. And when you live abroad, like, you wouldn't have a day off for Thanksgiving if you're not, it's difficult to to celebrate those holidays which are not celebrated in the country where you're living, but it's important to do so, even a little bit, talk about it. I remember when I was living in Japan, they don't celebrate Christmas. They have days off afterwards for the emperor's birthday. But on Christmas Eve, Japanese, where do they go to celebrate Christmas? They go to KFC. And I remember once having a party with my Japanese friend to have a French, Anglo-French party, and they all arrived with their bucket of KFC. So those are traditions, and it's remained a joke in our family. We don't actually go to KFC on Christmas Eve, but we still talk about it. So that's what I mean. When Kimberly says, what are the traditions you want to make? Remember what you used to do as a child, what you did growing up, and maybe this year talk about all those traditions. And that's what Kimberly's going to talk about. But third culture kids, they need help in determining their identity. And this Christmas holiday tradition will be important to give them some guidance. That's from my experience. It's very helpful to have Christmas tradition that will evolve according to where you go and live. But just always remember, what makes you happy when you remember Christmas? Was it a special breakfast? I used to have crumpets, for breakfast. It's not really extraordinary, but those are the happy memories I have from Christmas. So like we were saying, Kimberly, going back to our childhood, maybe talking with our grandparents.
Absolutely. I think it's very important to keep those traditions and memories alive. The memories of what you did with grandma. And I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and this lady was talking about how podcasts in some parts of the world are becoming more popular. And she said, this is almost a way in which we go back into the cave as caveman, and the sharing of stories, the sharing of the hunt, the sharing of the gathering that took place that day. And these are the things that bind us. And I come from a family that's very much a storytelling family. And, we have the stories that we've heard over and over again, but it's very important, that telling of the story, which is part of our tradition, the sharing of things that happened. The year of the blizzard. If anyone was living in Colorado for Christmas in 1982, you will remember the blizzard of 1982. We still talk about it to this day, and how people were trying to get out of their homes on Christmas Eve, and it couldn't happen. And everybody in our family knows what happened that day, but we patiently listened to everyone telling the story. And, my little niece hears that story now, and, now that's going to become part of hers, and she's then going to also tell her own stories. We think that these kind of traditions are important and they're fun. And in the time of COVID, we have time and space for them. And I'm even thinking it might be nice to write some of them down with your children if they're a little bit older, or a partner, and maybe creating a kind of memory book along those lines for the holidays. So how can we preserve those memories? Well, we can write things down, a kind of diarizing of it. It doesn't have to be so formal as that, but taking pictures during your Zoom events, and taking pictures with your family or however you celebrate, and sharing those things. Maybe that's going to be done through an album that you send around. And a lot of us are thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so busy, you want me to make an album? Okay, I hear you on that. But it doesn't have to be 25 pages. It can be just a few pictures that you send along in a card to somebody. We don't only have to send cards at Christmas time for people who send them. But maybe post Christmas memory cards, or cards related to the new year, if you've got that time because of COVID.
We were thinking, Kimberly, also a good thing about preserving the memories that can be also linked to the celebration in itself would be like during, what you usually do at weddings is like have everybody prepare a little speech funny speech about, we've all been, this year was difficult, but there were also very funny moments. If you look, you really, when there was no more toilet paper in the shops, and we've all been through that. But you could do speeches, and you could, for those who are more computer savvy, and the older kids really are, maybe do a PowerPoint or things like that everybody can follow while, you're doing the Zoom. And, there are so many things you can do. And that will help you keep the memory. And I think when Kimberly says, yeah, we're all very busy. I know we are, but I think this year we need a little more time, maybe less present buying, and maybe more, giving our memories. And I think that's what you're getting at. It's less about going to the shops, which we're not really meant to, and more about more reflection, because we need to keep those memories. And for those who may think, well, I don't really have family, I don't really care, you can find a way of celebrating your way. Like we were saying, no pressure. If you don't want to go on a long, a day-long Zoom with your family, you can. When we're saying, how do you want to spend your day? If you want to go on a hike on Christmas Day, to go on a hike and maybe, film a little bit and send it to your family saying, this is how I'm spending Christmas 2020.
Exactly. And letting them know that you're thinking of them, and, in the absence of their presence physically, they're there with you mentally, and sharing that, and also being a recipient of that kind of message and engaging with people on what they've done as well. Taking joy in each other's individual celebrations, I think, is very important. It may also be important to think about, take time for yourself as well, to just think about the year and what it's been. And, everybody sort of is so negative when they talk about this year and COVID, and it's a dumpster fire, et cetera, et cetera. I think for me, there's been a lot of good moments. And I know it's been a rough year for a lot of people who've had COVID, people who've lost family members, et cetera. And in some countries, the politics around it. But on a personal level, there's been some joy this year too. And to take time to reflect on that. And hopefully we'll get a better 2021. But, we don't know. We don't know what the future may bring.
Well, yeah, but what's really important, like we said when we started this talk, is really no pressure, no guilt. And for once, just to try and do what makes you happy. And to end on a positive note, this year is the first time that you can actually do what you want. Well, apart, of course, from traveling back, but you're stuck, so you have to make the most of it. So,
absolutely,
don't bring yourself down and saying, I can't travel and I'm stuck. And no, you have the opportunity to do something you really want. Do it. I know it's not easy, but thanks to technology, if you want to be with your family on that day, you will be able to, who cares about time difference? Don't sleep. It's a holiday. So if you want to spend the whole night to be on the same, time line as in the US or Europe, just party all night if you want. It's very important. And what we were saying is that we were talking about those Christmas holidays. We all know we have all different religions, all different, things to celebrate. So what we've just said is also, valuable for other celebration and other, to help you communicate with your family. The most important is to have things in common. When we're saying building up to Christmas, we all know that if we have one talk every month, it's not enough. It's awkward. But if you build up to Christmas, then it may be easier. And then, as we were saying, Chinese New Year is around the corner as usual at this time of year. So why not continue? Usually we all travel when we're in Asia. It's the time to travel. This year we may not be able to. Why not share with our family back home a meal? Why not order Chinese takeaway and for them and try and exchange lycée. It's just the idea of how to make your family back home understand what you're living, because this is another subject, but we all know that family back home, they don't stay the same, but they actually do compared to us who are living different things. And sometimes it's difficult to communicate because of that. But if you share with them things that your daily life, and Chinese New Year would be a way to do it, or even Christmas, wherever you are, if you share with your family back home the way they celebrate Christmas in your country, that would be a really good way to bond on this special Christmas. What do you think, Kimberly?
I think it's a great idea to continue the tradition, to increase the sharing and the learning about different cultures. I mean, my little 5-year-old niece doesn't know a whole lot about Chinese culture, but she knows that once a year she gets a red packet with a few dollars in it, and that's pretty awesome to her. So I'm hoping to instill in her the idea of traditions beyond what's just happening around her in the US. So I agree. I think it's wonderful. So yeah.
So yeah, to end on that note, it's all about taking control, like it's written on the on the slide. So I don't know if anybody wants to share anything. If you have something to add, please feel free to do so. I hope you've enjoyed that talk. For us, it's great to be able to talk about something else than law, although we do love it.
I just wanted to do something lighthearted.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we're humans also. So we know we do a lot of things like our clients do. So this talk is a way to make people understand that we have feelings.
Let's not go crazy, Sarah Jane. Anyway, thank you guys very much for spending a little bit of time with us on this subject. And good. I'm glad if somebody's writing that they feel a little bit more positive. I hope so. I hope people really do feel a little bit positive about it, because I think that there's a lot of hidden joy to be had out there this season. And I'm definitely on the hunt for it every single day. So I hope you guys join Sarah Jane and I on that hunt for joy this Christmas. Thank you very much, James. Good for you to be participating on it. All right, goodbye, everyone. Have a wonderful Christmas. And thanks again for spending some time with us.
Thank you. Bye.